In a neighborhood of Mexico City that collects monuments the way others collect pharmacies sits the Frontón México. Step inside today, and you're greeted by cold marble floors and the architectural ghosts of dead betting windows. But back in 1929, the sweeping Art Deco arena was the largest jai-alai court on Earth. It boasted a 62-meter-long court, custom-built for a game where a dense, goatskin-covered ball would tear through the air at over 300 kilometers per hour. It was a veritable temple dedicated to speed and to sheer spectacle. Just picture the titans of history who once walked those very marble floors. The great comedian Mario Moreno, better known as Cantinflas, was one of its most devoted regulars. Ernest Hemingway played on this court and was later heartbroken by its decline. In 1921, Babe Ruth even confessed to the Cuban press that he preferred this sport to baseball, at least until a court injury ended his amateur career. Contrevieux was there, Walt Disney was there. But then, sometime in the 1990s, the lights went out. Driven by labor disputes, financial collapse, and complete indifference from the government, the betting windows went dark forever. That glamorous world simply vanished overnight, and nothing ever replaced it. But the true story we're exploring today isn't about that glamorous cousin, jai-alai. It's about a collision of empires. Our story begins somewhere far less glamorous than the Frontón Mexico. It starts on the bat courts of Mexico City's elite clubs in the late 1890s. Basque immigrants had brought their traditional stonewall game across the Atlantic. Around the same time, Anglo-American tennis culture was infiltrating the private clubs, and players just started improvising. They kept the Basque architecture, the towering stone wall, the enclosed physical space, but they threw away the bare hand and the traditional wicker basket, replacing them with the Anglo-American tennis racket and a small pressurized rubber ball. At first, they called this compound creation Frontón tennis. Over time, it shortened to just Frontenis. Mexico didn't just stumble into a new sport. It deliberately fused two distinct imperial cultures, producing something neither civilization could have possibly dreamed up on its own. The adaptation didn't stop there. When global rubber supplies were cut off during World War II, a resourceful man named Francisco Beltran began experimenting at his workshop until he figured out how to repressurize old dead tennis balls. He and his partner, Jesus Ledesma, soon opened a factory to mass-produce them. This origin story sets the stage for a deeply unsettling paradox, a story of invisible champions. It's a paradox of total world domination, met with complete institutional silence. 17. Mexico has won the Frontenis World Championship in 17 out of the 19 editions held since 1952. And the women's team? They have won every single edition since their absolute category was introduced in 1990. Let me put that dominance into perspective because it requires us to rethink Mexican athletics. The Pelota Vasca specialties have handed Mexico more Olympic medals than diving, race walking, and taekwondo combined. Let me repeat that. More than all other individual and group representations combined. Yet, if I mention names like Jose Becerra Torres, known as Neno, or Arturo Rodriguez Faisal, El Turi, these world-conquering champions remain virtually unknown outside their own tight-knit circuit. So how exactly does a nation ignore its own greatest champions? It takes a systemic blackout. First, the national education system completely excluded the sport from public school curriculums. Then the government actively dissuaded it by building basketball courts over the existing walls, which is ironic, considering basketball inherently favors tall stature, while front tennis offers no height advantage, making it a perfect fit for the average Mexican physique. Then comes the media. During the 2006 World Championship, which was actually hosted in Mexico City, local television networks provided zero coverage, a total blackout. And socially, the sport has been actively discredited, often stigmatized by elites as nothing more than a game for vagrants. But beneath that heavy blanket of institutional erasure, there is a profound story of sacrifice and survival. The sport only survives because of the fierce, intimate reality of athletes who fund their own global victories. Aprimun, winning on their own lows. That is the exact phrase Rosa Maria Flores Buendia, known affectionately as Rosita Buendia, uses to describe funding her career. She won 3 world championships and an Olympic gold medal, yet when she needed to travel to a world championship, she had to raffle off rackets at her local club just to afford the airfare. She worked as a primary school teacher, and her modest salary paid for her sport. Her mother literally sewed her playing skirts by hand, and even made the skirts for her playing partner. Rosita competed at the highest level across 3 decades, and she describes her sacrifice as accumulating in heavy layers. First, you sacrifice your friends, then your work, and finally, your family. Even during the few years when meager government stipends appeared, it never stopped being a woman. The institutional neglect these athletes face is hard to overstate. Consider the 1988 World Junior Championship in Biarritz, France, when women were finally admitted to compete. First, they were strictly required to play in short skirts. Then came the courts. Frontenis is designed for a 30-meter court, but the venue only had 36-meter walls. The solution? Organizers simply bolted a temporary wooden wall onto the existing concrete just to shorten the playing surface for the women's matches. The infrastructure for their presence was improvised with wood and screws on the spot, but their dominance on that court, it was immediate and it was absolute. Skip ahead to 2006. Mexico wins the World Championship as the host nation, and again, not a single local television camera is present to broadcast the final. The winning delegation was eventually granted a reception with President Vicente Fox. Pedro Santamaria, a champion hailing from a tiny corn farming pueblo, stood face to face with the president of his country and delivered this piercing declaration. The Frontenis selection fulfills for the Mexican people exactly what is invested in it. We are winners in our country. The president offered no reply. To fully grasp why a Dane so thoroughly ignored by the state inspires such fierce, lifelong devotion, we have to listen to the echoes of the ancients. We have to dig down into the civilizational foundation of this land. You see, the Mesoamerican ballgame was already operating as a cultural cornerstone centuries before a single Basque immigrant ever crossed the ocean. The Mayas held a concept called olin, the movement of the ball as the primordial motor of life, a perfect synthesis of opposing forces. The Aztecs hosted deeply solemn ballroom festivals attended by the sovereign and the entire royal court. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they didn't have to introduce a ballgame. They found indigenous populations already playing a version of one, using a rope to divide a court, striking the ball only with their bare hands. The later convergence of the Basque Waldian and the Mexican people wasn't just a coincidence. There was a profound act of recognition. The Basque scholar Alatz González Ebrisqueta draws a fascinating anthropological parallel here. Consider the Greek agora, a civic space designed to substitute the violence of the sword with the diplomacy of the word to resolve civic tension. The Basque fronton served the exact same purpose. Back in the 16th century, as the Basque country transitioned away from centuries of bloody factional warfare, the wall game formalized their conflict. It played red against blue, the literal colors of the old warring factions. It took the violence and made it safe, bound it by rules, made it resolvable. The fronton became a civic technology. It was a tool used to seal community fractures through the shared spectacle of sport. The simple act of bouncing a ball against a wall confirmed who the community was. And that exact same civic technology is alive and well today, driving an engine of excellence from below. If we leave the history books and travel into the forgotten, semi-rural margins of modern Mexico, we find where the magic actually happens. Take San Juan Ixtayopan. It's a modest town of 35,000 people in the Tlalec delegation, just a 20-minute drive from the ghosts of the Frontón México. It has no cinema, it has no theater, it doesn't even have a gas station. But from this single, unassuming community and its immediate neighbors, Tulihualco and Xochimilco, have emerged more Olympic medals and world championships from Mexico than from the entire rest of the country combined. In these towns, the earthy concrete reality of the community fronton takes the place of the cinema and the social club. On a Tuesday afternoon, you'll find informal, self-regulated betting managed by a corredor who shouts the score aloud. The excellence here isn't manufactured by elite sports academies. It's sustained purely through intergenerational teaching, uncles passing the racket to nephews, fathers coaching sons. And the local rivalry is so fierce it completely overrides national loyalty. During the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, Pedro Santamaria of Tulihualco and Alfredo Zia of Xochimilco both won gold, but there was palpable tension between them. Why? Because at the absolute apex of global competition, their primary loyalty wasn't to the Mexican flag. It was to their neighboring, rival corn farming towns. The Frontón Ixtayopan is performing the exact same function as the church atrium did in 16th century Bilbao, confirming your identity by contesting it against your neighbors. The sport that Mexico invented, entirely dominates, and systematically ignores tells us perhaps the most honest truth about how this country actually functions. It reveals a nation where excellence is sustained not by grand institutions, but by the quiet resilience of local communities, where identity is defended not from above, but from below. It's a game born from brilliant improvisation under scarcity, played by champions whose names nobody remembers, fought on public walls, winning world championships in total silence. So it leaves us with one final, lingering question. What else is Mexico carrying that it doesn't even know it invented? Basta. This is Mexico.
If this story opened a door, stay and subscribe. Basta is the second look. Mexico without the filter, without the shortcuts. New episodes every Tuesday and Saturday. See our suggested video right there in the box.